Welcome one and welcome all. It is January 29th and we are live with Upstream, episode number 135. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, Alex. Thanks for asking, buddy.
Of
Appreciate it.
course.
We are doing fantastic, Alex. Good to see you guys, as always. Kind of an action-packed week. Actually, it feels like I haven't talked to you guys in a while, even though we did talk last week. How'd you guys like having Mr.Mobile on, talking BlackBerry? Yeah, I had a nice time, too.
Yeah, nice change of pace.
No, and it was just kind of timely as well. I mean, the Priv re-review that he literally published right after us speaking was just right on the nose. I thought that review was excellent. If you haven't seen it, go check it out because it says a lot about the Priv, and it says it in a way I think that's a little bit more compelling than probably our rants here about the device, and our frustrations over the many weeks of Upstream. So definitely go check that out. Priv's still an awesome device. If you're not looking for, a couple different things that the Priv may have some setbacks with, but definitely nice to have Michael on, and hopefully we can have him on again, once the Mercury actually drops, which seems like the Mercury is officially going to be dropping now at Mobile World Congress, which we kind of expected. Blaze, with that kind of announcement, we saw almost like a consolidation of BB Mobile, a handle, I guess, owned by TCL to help promote their new line of BlackBerry phones. Do you think that's a good thing to do? I think it's kind of like a genius idea because it takes like one handle and focuses it on like handsets, and then BlackBerry's actual handle and stuff can be used for the enterprise. I've still seen like more consolidation happening on some of the BlackBerry Twitter sources, like down to that one handle. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they did that consolidation on the TCL side.
Yeah, and I think you'll basically continue to see some more of that consolidation happening throughout the various avenues that they have for social media and stuff like that. So I don't know, just keep your eye on the Twitter accounts and things of that nature to be able to go ahead and follow along with it. But yeah, it makes sense. Unfortunately, I don't. There's still going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, well, which account do I discuss these things with? Like, is it the BlackBerry Help account? Is it like the BlackBerry Mobile account? It's still going to be a little bit scrambled for a little while. But I guess that depends on how well they implement the changeover too. So
definitely, and it just makes sense because then TCL can just wholly focus on pushing it, and all BlackBerry needs to do now is just retweet, and it becomes just a really, really easy, fluid thing for them to do, sharing different things that they have and really being able to work together and have a larger platform. I've seen what TCL did with the Alcatel Twitter handle and social stuff, and that's really like gone really far. I think they've got like a couple thousand, like tens of thousands of followers there, if not hundreds of thousands. So that stuff is good. I'm looking forward to seeing more of kind of a social push from TCL. You guys did an awesome article about that ABC show, The Last Man Standing, and how Tim Allen had that Mercury out there live on air a month before the device is launched. I mean, that stuff is pretty exciting, and you should think about that, in terms of the scope of what BlackBerry and TCL are going to be doing. Just really positive to see. What did you guys think seeing Tim Allen have that device out so early ahead of the launch? Do you think that's a good thing?
yeah, I mean, for me, it's nice to see that they're already laying some groundwork there. I mean, it really is just the beginning of what I think TCL has planned for it. So, Tim Allen is a good spot because Tim Allen has always been a BlackBerry fan, and the history there with the subtle marketing behind it has happened before. So, I mean, it can't do any harm. That's the best thing to say about it. Definitely, especially with the news that the Mercury did make coming out of CES 2017. Like, it was on TV. It made its way across some avenues that it generally wouldn't make its way across. Whether or not the portrayal was entirely accurate doesn't necessarily matter. People saw that device, at least some of the images of that device, across some avenues that they probably haven't seen it before. So maybe now, it creates a little bit more interest in what they have coming. And basically, if anybody was, paying attention or, casually watching the show, they would see that in Tim Allen's hands and say, hey, isn't that the device that we saw on, whatever website? Like I said, it really can't do any harm at this point, even though it was, just really subtle marketing, to be able to go ahead and have it out there. Hopefully, it will become not so subtle in the future. Hopefully, we'll see some ads or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like this is really the only time we ever see any BlackBerry advertising is with Tim Allen, and it makes sense that he's kind of a brand proponent of the brand at least, and he's pushing it. And he loves BlackBerry, which is great. It's good to have people like that aside from just Kim Kardashian. I don't even know if she's still on BlackBerry at this point, but I think it's a good thing just casually see it. That logo is very recognizable, so I'm sure people watching it, even if they don't know that BlackBerry's still around, they'll see the logo and be like, oh, that, it looks like a BlackBerry, and boom, the front of it, it's like, oh wow, that has a keyboard. At the very least of letting people know, hey, BlackBerry's still around, it's got to be a good thing. I don't know if it's really going to sell phones necessarily, but in terms of brand, it can't hurt. So
Yeah.
It's just interesting, I think, that there's a good management of the kind of hype building up for this device. And that gives me a lot of hope in terms of what we're going to be able to see once the device is actually fully out there. Whether any refinements happen on the hardware or where more likely it's going to happen in the software, I'm excited to see BlackBerry's nougat as well. I think that's the real big story here from a software perspective for BlackBerry and from a security perspective. A great new hardware. We're going to be seeing more of it. Blaze did a little write-up on the Indonesian BlackBerry device that potentially may be coming out. And Alex, pull up those specs actually, because that's really interesting. When I looked closer at those specs, it kind of it's like all over the place. And I don't know if I'm reading these specs correctly or not, Blaze. Maybe you can weigh in, but the spec lineup seems like very, very low end, but also kind of like current in a lot of senses. So it's a 5.5 inch 720 HD display. It's got a Snapdragon 425, which is a relatively weaker chip, but then it has 4 gigabytes of RAM. What? 32 gigabytes of onboard storage, which is another. I'm so glad BlackBerry's not even thinking about phones with 16 gigabytes anymore. That's awesome. And then a 13 megapixel and 8 megapixel camera setup on either side. And then a dual SIM, which is, again, something we've all been wanting in a BlackBerry for some time. So to get a dual SIM and then have a solid 3,000 milliamp battery, same as in the D-Tech 60, that's pretty impressive for a budget device for, a sub-market that BlackBerry has. Blaze, do you think that these are kind of going to be on the nose? And is a 5.5 inch screen maybe too big for what people are expecting from a BlackBerry in that market?
I don't know. I mean, it's a good question, but I mean, the key thing that sticks out to me is the 4 gigabytes of RAM. That's kind of why does that have 4 gigabytes of RAM, but BlackBerry Mercury only reportedly has 3 gigabytes of RAM? That's kind of seems a little bit off. And I mean, I don't know. We haven't even seen this device. It hasn't popped up anywhere or anything like that. I don't know. I mean, the source of the information has been reliable thus far in terms of, the accuracy that has been relayed, but who's to say, everybody gets something wrong at some point in time. So, I mean, looking at that situation where we haven't even seen the device yet, I'm just kind of curious about the specs. I wouldn't place any bets on them as of yet. So
it's crazy because, to me at least, a budget all touch Android that's basically stock running, maybe Nougat, maybe Marshmallow, whatever kind of setup, that's something I'm interested in and maybe getting a hands on, and it's a lock now potentially to this Indonesian market. It's just very interesting. I mean, those specs seem like a Leap type device to me, and that's something that, has, some sense of usability for people on this side of the earth as well. But then you think about the lineup with D-Tech 50 and, what TCL is bringing to the table for them in this region, it kind of makes sense to have a separate focus and go for exactly what is needed in that market. So cool to see nonetheless.
Yeah,
Alex,
I'm kind of interested in the overlap as well. I want to know. I mean, I know that there's not really any overlap, but in the eyes of some people who are looking on and seeing these scenarios lay out, there's going to be some overlap. Because, I mean, you have TCL building BlackBerry devices. You have this joint venture building BlackBerry devices. And, yeah, chances are the person who is buying a TCL BlackBerry isn't going to be able to go ahead and purchase that Indonesian BlackBerry very simply. It has to be like imported or have a friend of a friend who can get it to you or something along those lines. So, there's really not any general overlap, but there is at the same time. I'm just wondering how like TCL is like looking at that situation. Like, do they have to like sort of compete in some sort of way with this branding? Do they feel as though that maybe if the joint venture puts out a crappy device, that's going to hurt their side of the branding story? I mean, it's all there's still a lot to be explored here with how they're going to roll these things out, and it's going to be really, really interesting over the next few months to be able to get the grand perspective of how all of this stuff is going to come together to make a cohesive plan. And I don't know, man, it's just one of those things where I'm just really interested in how they're going to put it all together and how it's going to appear to end users. When it comes down to it, like on the street level for everyday users, I don't think it really matters that much. But for us who are invested in telling the stories behind the actual situations, it really becomes problematic because, like, how do I introduce this Indonesian device to these readers when I tell them that they have this TCL BlackBerry coming too? It's really, really a complicated situation to lay out, and I don't know how it's going to work out over the next few months.
And maybe that's something BlackBerry's kind of in the center of managing. We don't really know whether it's something they hand off or they just get the devices in and they're like, yeah, it looks good, slap the branding on it, we're good to go, or what kind of quality controls there are across the board, especially if they're injecting their secure chip. They're there somewhere, right, in the process. It's really seeing the depth of all that, and as Blaze said, how that comes together. Over on Crackberry, I put up a post on the DTEK 60 camera and really all of the BlackBerry Android cameras that they've got on Priv, the 50 and the 60, and how to just get better shots with it. It's a pretty straightforward kind of tutorial running you through the manual settings on the device, and as well some of what you can do with outside, applications in the Google ecosystem. Specifically, I talk about ViscoCam, but the actual Android software that BlackBerry has on their devices has an inbuilt image editor as well. So you could always use that. Definitely, I think the biggest pro tip on that list is to turn your camera sideways. That irks me to no end when someone's shooting a video or taking, a portrait shot that doesn't need to be in like a portrait mode, right? So I think that, and as well that the shutter can work as the volume rockers can work as the shots, and the shutter for your phone is something I think a lot of people could get use out of. I can do that on some other phones too, but BlackBerry's been pretty consistent. That's crossed over from BB10 and it's available on the Android one. What a lot of people don't know about that is that in the volume rocker settings, deep in the camera at the very bottom, you can actually set your volume rockers to zoom in, increase or decrease audio, and or shoot and capture that shot. So you have some flexibility. And all of that stuff is talked about because that's the same type of camera setup we're very likely going to get on the Mercury. I was actually watching one of Roland's videos from Mobile World Congress, and he had the device, and he talking a little bit about the software, and it looked like the camera app that he was using wasn't like fully scaled appropriately to the resolution and things like that. Overall indicating that the software that was running on it was not final, obviously. So interesting to see like what we're going to be getting, because I also threw up a post over at Crackberry talking about how that Mercury device may be running the exact same camera sensor as the Google Pixel. And Alex, have you been impressed with what the Google Pixel's been able to capture for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it too is just the speed of it. Oftentimes someone will be like, need to take a quick picture, or I just want to do something really quick. The camera is very responsive, and the quality has been great. I haven't played with it to the extent that you have. Even day one that you had the Pixel, you sent over some pretty cool pictures. I'm not so big into taking photos. It's more of a utility to me, but it is nice to have, So if they mirror the camera, and I wonder if some of the technology can be pushed over as well, then that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds awesome, one of the best cameras out right now is going to be on your phone, but software has so much to do with how all of that
Yeah.
happens, right? The post editing, the sharpening, the exposure control, all that stuff comes down to software.
Yeah.
What I can appreciate is that the BlackBerry Android software has way more features and functionality and controls than the Google Pixel. Google's is just a straight shooter. You can do very minor exposure changes, but it's not very robust out of the box. Whereas BlackBerry has the potential, because you can take the time and get that like really crispy shot. You've got a potential to be able to get a lot of great things out of that camera. Can shoot 4K. Standard going to be over at 1080p 24 a second on the frame. So just some interesting stuff. I'm more interested to see kind of the myth get broken for people that megapixels mean everything. When I did the review of the DTEK 60 Blaze, it mentioned it in his as well, and he's used the device much more than I have, longer term. But the DTEK 60 camera is great, but it's not something that you necessarily want to just shoot one and put in your pocket. You may want to shoot a couple, right, and then put it in your pocket just to make sure you got it. Whereas with the Pixel and other phones I've used, iPhones as well, you just take it out, you shoot it, and you got a half decent shot to use. So I'm also interested to see whether or not BlackBerry software is able to make a lot of use out of that shooter versus just the higher megapixel count getting that quality for them. So a lot of things to manage there, but I think BlackBerry's in a good place to really just focus on the software and nail it, and maybe do some advancements, right? And we've talked on previous podcasts how the software experience that we're getting across the board on the Android front hasn't really moved much, right? New things have come, new additions. Dark Hub is in beta right now. So there's stuff coming, right? But nothing really game-changing and monumental from the software side. So maybe Mercury is a good time to start introducing some of those new software pushes, Let's get BlackBerry Jot out there for people to start doodling around with or something like that. Blaze, what's up with these autoloaders? And why do we keep getting new ones? A new 10.3.3 autoloader is available?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think there was a lot of stuff that was actually broken in some of those first releases that went out. Because, consistently, there has been files that have been updated within the OS. It's not like they're just pushing out the same OS over and over for different carriers or anything like that. There are actual changes within the OS. Nothing huge and substantial, but they have improved a few things and cleaned up a few bugs within 10.3.3. So, more power to the guy who was working on it to be able to go ahead and continue pushing those builds out. But I don't know. It's one of those things where nothing seems to be drastically changed, but there's definitely some improvements there. So, if you haven't gotten 10.3.3 yet via your computer or through the desktop operations or anything like that, then make sure that you go ahead and get it downloaded because it is there. It is available for most devices to be able to update too. So.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on my Classic to get the update at all, and I don't know. Who knows? It's been weird because the autoloader is literally like the best go-to if you want to update your OS at least in the current day and state. I wonder whether we can get like a more consolidated rollout for everybody, carriers included. Like, are there even carrier conversations happening about getting this OS available and out there for people? I really wonder whether that's something going on or not. But
yeah, I don't know. The only device that I updated manually myself is my AT&T passport because I knew AT&T wasn't going to go ahead and push that out, right? So I left all of my other passports to be able to just see exactly when they would go ahead and get updated, and all of them came through at the exact same time. And they were, my white one is unlocked from Shop BlackBerry, red one is unlocked from Shop BlackBerry, and I have a black one from Shop BlackBerry, what is unlocked, and they've all consistently got the updates at the exact same time. So I don't know. It really comes down to the carrier aspect of it. I don't even know if some carriers are, maybe some of the smaller carriers aren't even pushing it out at this point. In which case, that's kind of problematic. But at the same time, it's not because you can download the files. This is what those autoloaders and blitz files are for. It's for the people who are stuck. So, like I said, if you don't have it as of yet and you simply can't wait for it or feel as though that your carrier is taking too long, then definitely go ahead and just get it downloaded and manually update that stuff.
My cousin's actually he switched over from a Q10 to a Passport. He bought the AT&T Silver Edition Passport about a year ago or so. didn't switch over to it for the longest time. He just switched over to it, and he just went on vacation for his honeymoon, and he loves the phone. Like he told me halfway through, he's like, I want to buy a second one, just in case, you know. And I'm like, I was like, you know, that's where you might want to give the Mercury or whatever the second version is or whatever a try. But it's like he loves the phone. He's using Google Photos and all that fun stuff through whatever that hack is to get Google Play running on BlackBerry 10, and he's been even messaging me on Allo, believe it or not. So it's been kind of interesting.
Those passports are pretty much gone now off of Shop BlackBerry and stuff.
Yeah, that flash sale really probably took out the last of those inventory. And, you know, it's interesting because like now is the time to hoard it. I mean, guys, like legitimately think about this right now. BlackBerry 10 launched 4 years ago tomorrow, which is crazy to think about, and how quickly this transition has gone on and how consistent John Chen's been with what the direction has been and really holding to it. So, you know, I'm impressed to see kind of further where BlackBerry can go and take their software efforts. But for now, I want to play just our patron question, and we'll close out the show here. Nick asked about cameras, so I'm going to get this queued up, and Alex, hopefully you can level the audio. I'm just going to go full out on this.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, if it's loud and someone's yelling at you, it's probably Alex's fault.
Hi, James. Hi, Upstream crew. First, I just want to thank you for your excellent quality podcasts and great insights into BlackBerry news. My question is whether, with the rumors of the BlackBerry Mercury sensor being the same as the Google Pixel, whether or not you think the BlackBerry Mercury camera will be as good as the DTEK 60s or better. Thanks.
So the question sums up as, you know, whether or not the Pixel camera is going to be better than the DTEK 60s. The Mercury is better than DTEK 60s, and I'm hoping it will be. It's tough because obviously the DTEK 60s is like a flagship smartphone, right? It's got all the high-end specs and whatnot. And then the Mercury may be like this mid-range, mid to high-end, you know, device. Whether they're aiming for the cameras to be better, I think you'd always want to like progress with everything you do. Maybe, you know, you have an idea of where you want it to lay in the market, but you want to always make sure everything's better. Like even with the 625 processor, I expect them to want it to perform as good as the DTEK 60 does in every way. And it's really, you're paying for like horsepower in a higher spec phone, but not performance. That performance overall is pretty even on the keel. So I expect it to be better personally. Not only is the sensor probably better, and it seems to be able to get good results in other devices, but I think scaling it back and letting BlackBerry software really do a lot more of the work is something that can help that camera really shine on the Mercury as well. And in the hands-on, we saw people who handled the camera said it was fast, which is what Alex was just mentioning, appreciating about the sensor he's currently using. And as well as the pictures were fairly good in the kind of nasty CES lighting that they had there. So, Nick, I'm looking forward to it, really. Alex, you think they can manage to get better than some of the things that I've shown you, like on the DTEK 60?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the cutting edge phones right now, they're all even on the same kind of level. They're good in their own regard. So it's like really you can't have a bad smartphone camera nowadays. So long as you have a decent enough processor to handle it, it's going to be fine. But maybe I'm not necessarily the right person to ask anyway, because it's not like I buy a phone for a camera. It's more a camera having, you know, a phone having a nice camera is a nice thing to have. So, yeah, I think it'll be great. It'll be better than the DTEK 60 and, you know, not too different, I don't think. So we'll see, though.
Blaze is like, no, DTEK 60 for the win.
No, I think it'll. I mean, like you said, it's always a good idea to go ahead and have things progressing and making sure that things are better than what they used to be previously. You know, BlackBerry has kind of a history of not really focusing on the cameras, although to their credit, they have been getting much better about it over the past couple of years. So hopefully that process continues on. And I don't know. It just basically comes down to a wait and see moment. Just because something has all of the stuff to make something great doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be great. You know what I mean? It comes down to the software, the implementation of it all, and whether those components actually speak to one another to be able to go ahead and produce some great images. So, I mean, do I expect it to be better than the DTEK 60? I hope so. Do I expect it to be better than the Priv? I hope so. But it's one of those things where you just kind of have to wait and see. Also, I mean, here's the thing: what really bugs me about cameras is that, I mean, when it comes down to like camera comparisons and stuff like that, people are like, well, how does the camera compare to the DTEK 50 or the DTEK 60 and this and that? And it's like, well, I mean, there's certain scenarios where a camera is going to be crap. Like, you're not going to compare the DTEK 50 to the DTEK 60 or something like that, right? Because that the camera is just not on par. But when you start putting these devices that are similar weighted together, it's kind of like, well, do you really notice much of a difference? Is there anything there that like you can't like just filter off or just slightly edit with some of the apps that are available? Like, is it really that far off that you feel the need to like complain about it, or you're not going to buy it based off of that one certain photo? You know what I mean? I think for the most part, I think it's safe to say that cameras in smartphones have reached a point where, unless you're buying like a lower end device and comparing it to a higher end device, the majority of the cameras are pretty much on par with each other when it comes to it, because the majority of the part components that are being put in there are all the exact same components. So it really comes down to like the software side of things, and whether or not you can edit those photos and make them look better. It's just one of those things where, I don't know, it kind of bugs me how much people put a focus on it. I get it, but it bugs me that like someone would say like, oh, I'm not going to buy the Priv because the camera sucks. I'm going to buy this one, when really the pictures are pretty much kind of similar anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's jump into our after show, guys. Always good to. Oh,
before we jump into the after show, and I really hate to leave this on like kind of a sad note, and to be honest with you, I'm not exactly a person who kind of deals with death very well, but I do want to just go ahead and say that we had a member of the Crackberry community die on January 20th. He passed away at home peacefully. So I just want to say shout out to Ken. Rest in peace, buddy. That was it. Like I said, I'm terrible at dealing with death.
Yeah.
He deserves some recognition.
No, definitely.
absolutely. And we'll link up that Crackberry thread so people can, share their condolences down in the description on this video. So if you want to check that out, please do that. Alex, cue up this image because I sent it to you over on Slack. This is what we're going to talk about a little bit in our after show, and a little bit more talking about BB10 and some of the history in our after show tonight. But that is a supposed would-be render of what like a developer version of that Mercury device would look like. And barring that awkward 5-row keyboard with the numbers on top, I think the all-black unit looks awesome compared to the silver edition. That's just me personally. We'll jump into more of that later. Anyway, guys, we'll catch you next week. Take it easy.
Great.
Take care.
Later, guys.